Good morning, everyone. Let's start out this morning with a hymn sing with a couple of hymns that we are not singing through the rest of the season. And I put two of them in your bulletin, and I've since learned that the first one is not familiar to most people. So let's do some sight reading this morning. Page 186, Fling Wide the Door, verse 1 and 4. And then we'll go to O Come All Ye Faithful, page 212, verse 1 and 3. Thank you.
Welcome to worship at the McPherson Church of the Brethren. We are an open and affirming congregation that strives to be hospitable and attentive to all of creation. We do not always meet that goal, and we have our share of ups and downs. But in the midst of it all, we continue to listen to God's call on our individual lives and the life of this congregation. We continue to seek to follow Jesus, peacefully, simply, together. We are humbled you have chosen to worship with us. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Hi, church. I don't know. You know, when you get to be 70, you can't get those words out. But it's great to see you all here today. If you're worshiping with us on Channel 13 or online, we welcome you as well. If you're able, and by the way, my name's Deb Wagoner. See, I always forget that too. If you're able, I invite you to stand and greet one another. Do you have guests to introduce or announcements to make at this time?
Lois Grove. Our word today is joy, and did that not bring joy to our hearts to hear these kids playing for us? I'm just all excited about that. Thank you for doing that. And speaking of the kids, last Wednesday night at Mac Kids, Carol decided to ask the kids what they wanted to sing for a little Christmas sing-along. Guess what they picked? Oh, Holy Night was the first one. And they weren't just putting it out there, they sang the words. And the next one was Good Christian Men Rejoice. We thought we better stop here because their knowledge of songs is going to be way above ours. And they sang them, and it was so fun. But we did end with Rudolph. And I want to say that there's several of us who volunteer down at Washington School. And in that school, it's run by people from our church. We have the president and of the student council. We have the vice president who is Mennonite but attends our MAC kids. And then we have the secretary treasurer. So we've got not future leaders, we've got leaders right now in our kids from this church. And so I am just so proud of all these kids, and it brings me tremendous joy today. Vivian Bowman is the president, and Everett Dirksen is the vice president, and Emily Cannon, is that right? Emma Cannon is the treasurer.
John Wagoner. I've been around this church my whole life, so I have to think back 60 years or so when I was about the age that the kids who performed this morning were. It seems to me that we had a lot of kids who were involved in music, who played musical instruments, who played piano, violin, whatever the instrument was. So it seems like here at church we always had somebody who was performing for the congregation, sharing their musical talents with it. So this morning, it does my heart so much good to see all these kids up here playing piano for the congregation, because it takes me back about 50 years to when I was their age, and I had peers, we were doing the same thing in church, and it's so good to see them performing and playing, and I'm glad they're involved in music.
Leroy Weddle. I just wanted to give you a quick update. Many of you have been concerned about our granddaughter, Brooke, and have asked questions about how she's doing since she's got out of jail. She's been doing really well, and this past week she learned that she will be going to rehab tomorrow. Carol and I will be taking her to Sedan, Kansas for 28 days, I think, is the period of time. But I know many of you have asked about that, so please continue to hold her in your prayers and thoughts as she enters into this next phase of her recovery.
I'm very happy to announce my son, Vic, you stand up, who comes to us from France, where he lives right across from United Nations, where he works.
Nice to see you all.
Lamont Rothrock, and again, the music catches our attention. We are so blessed in this community with the school district also. We had the middle school singers come over, the choir come over and sing at assisted living, just did an incredible job. Nick Griggs has done such a wonderful job connecting with us. He brought the madrigals over to the houses this week to sing to the residents at Cedar Ridge and the employees. And then we had the jazz band come over and play for assisted living and independent living. And again, I don't think we always realize what's going on in the school districts, but they are so supportive of us, and it's so amazing to see the numbers and the time and energy that those people do volunteering. So I want to just shout out to the school district for what a wonderful job they've done this last week.
Thank you. Let us continue with our worship.
Things. Sorry. In the words of Adam Sandler, I have the microphone. A couple of things. One, I am in a little bit of pain. We moved yesterday, and I'm realizing at nearly 50, I can't get stuck underneath the refrigerator and survive very well. And so if I'm leaning, that's why. I mean, it's hurting. And I'm glad my doctor is here in case I need to. Another thing, one of the benefits, and today seems to be that day, that we reflect on what it was when we were growing up. And seeing Vic, every time I see Vic, I'm reminded of my journey at Camp Colorado as a camper in high school. And Vic was one of my counselors and remains near and dear to my heart. And I love him like a brother. I never imagined in all of my dreams that we'd be still on this journey together. And Brian Crushwitz was another one of those that was on staff that year. Today is also a day of sorrow, and we need to remember Pastor Catherine and her family in our prayers as they remember and reflect on her mom and the journey that their mom gave with the family, and please hold them all near and dear in our thoughts and prayers. As well as this Christmas season remains different, as mourning is married with grief and joy and celebration. The last thing, again, I am in pain, so I'm trying to get through this. I would ask that all of our outreach team members to come forward because we're going to bless the gifts that were collected by you for families that are Angel Tree and 2 families here in the community with Step MC. So if any outreach team members, you're not getting out of it. I know you're stepping down as chair, but 23 years together, you should know I'm persistent. Any other outreach team member? Thank you, Ann. Dustin, be ready to preach. All right. Paul and Nancy aren't with us. Tina is good. You, as a community of faith, continue to bless the wider community and reflect and live out the call to be Jesus in the neighborhood, as evident by these amazing gifts that you have collected to give to families in need. And so I want to take this time to offer a prayer. And will you join me in prayer as we bless these gifts? Holy God, on this day that we celebrate joy and song and celebration of you and the birth that changed the course of history, we ask that you use these gifts to bless others. For those families and those specifically those children that are going to receive these gifts, let it be a moment of liberation from all that they have to experience. Let it be a moment of truly being free from the chains that continue to remind them how life can be hard and challenging. Let it be an illustration of a love from strangers and their families that they never knew possible. Use these gifts to continue to change the world. And may we always answer the call to be your hands and feet in this neighborhood. In your name we pray. Amen. Thank you.
Christ, the newborn King, is come to bring us peace on earth, and He's mighty, cradled there in Bethlehem. Tell me, shepherd boy, piping tunes so merrily on the way to Bethlehem. Who will hear your tunes on these hills so lonely on the way to Bethlehem? Angels in the skies brought this message such, dance and sing for joy that Christ the newborn King is come to bring us peace on earth, and He's lying cradled there in Bethlehem. Now may hear my pipes on these hills so lonely on the way to Bethlehem. But a King will hear me play sweet lullabies when I get to Bethlehem. Angels in the sky overjoy the manger where the babe was lying, cradled in the arms of His mother Mary, sleeping down in Bethlehem. Where is this new King, shepherd boy, piping merrily? Is He there in Bethlehem? I will find Him soon by the star shining brightly in the sky of Bethlehem. Angels in the sky brought this message such, dance and sing for joy that Christ the newborn King is come to bring us peace on earth, and He's lying cradled there in Bethlehem. May I come with you, shepherd boy, piping merrily, come with you to Bethlehem. Pay my homage too at the new King's cradle, is it far to Bethlehem? Angels in the skies brought this message such, dance and sing for joy that Christ the infant King is born this night in lowly stable yonder, born for you in Bethlehem.
Thank you, choir, for that amazing, blessed dive deeper into the mystery of God. Will you please join me in the opening responsive litany? In this beginning time, this primal flush of holy joy, may the Word in the season of promise journey with you, if you are prepared to let it shape each step. The Word, Counselor, everlasting, mighty. May the Word, in its need for fulfillment, its enthusiasm for light, come alive on the path to promise and expectation. The Word, peace, incarnation, magnificent, annunciation. May the birthed Word invite each moment to be replayed and reborn towards our future. Fashion a neighborhood where incarnation and flesh negotiate and come together in the byways of the world. The Word, shelter, welcome, invitation, danger, step. May such a beginning, such a word accompany us this day. For here, and only here, in our journey, can Word be born, can Word become flesh, can Word become joy. Please rise for our opening song. seated. And as you find your seats, will the children please come forward as Barb leads us in the children's story.
Hey, guys. Wow, I may have a good problem here. My good problem is we've got a lot of kids, and this is awesome. You want to come down this way? I know we've got chairs, so just be careful of the musical instruments, okay? Yeah. So we continue on our journey of Advent. This is week number what? 3. Good job. So we started out with hope, and then last week I wasn't here, but you guys had peace, and today is joy. I love the way you said joy. What is joy?
Happiness.
Happiness. What else is joy? Can you think of another word for joy? Do you ever feel joy? Yeah. Loving. I like that one. Sharing. That brings us joy, doesn't it? Yeah. Well, I want to tell you a story. And I have the word what here?
Joy.
Joy. Yeah. Does it look very joyful?
No.
No? Why not?
Because it's just black.
It's dark. It's dark, isn't it? Yeah. When it,
That and you haven't scratched it out
yeah.
yet to make it rainbow.
You're right. So, one day I was in a store, and there were a lot of people in the store because everybody's waiting for the last minute to buy Christmas stuff. So there was a great big long line at the checkout. And people were getting kind of grumbly because they were tired of waiting in that line so long. They'd kind of forgotten their what? Their joy, yeah. And as we were waiting in the line, the little scanner things weren't working. And so they had to shut down the computer and start the scanner again, and then people got really unjoyful because they were tired of waiting in that line. Okay? Technology can be great, but it can be a problem too, can't it? Yeah. So they finally got that fixed, and that person moved on. There was still a long line. So the next person comes up, and it was a little boy about your age, and for the first time ever, he was going to buy his very own Christmas present for his dad, and he had all his money saved. So in his pockets, he pulls out all this change. Pennies and nickels and dimes, and lays them on the counter. Okay, what do you think the people in line were doing now? They were really unjoyful, weren't they? Because he starts counting all his change out. And then he forgets where he was in his counting. And he brings them all back, and he's counting them out again, you know. Well, finally his mother decides to help him. So the line moves on. The next person in line had quite a few things, so she starts putting them on the counter, and it's adding up on the cash register on the scanner. And then she realizes she doesn't have enough money to pay for everything. So somehow she's got to figure out what not to buy. And people were becoming more unjoyful. Yeah, yeah. So she finally figures out what she can afford to buy. She leaves everything else there, and she leaves, okay? All during this time, there's a baby crying. Because that baby is hungry maybe, tired maybe, not feeling very joyful either, right? So I'm standing in line, I'm going, then all of a sudden I notice there's Christmas music playing, okay? And that kind of lifts my spirits a little bit, and kind of some of my unjoyfulness starts to disappear. Okay? Yeah. Yeah. And then I started thinking, you know what? Is it really that big of a deal that the scanner didn't work? Because technology can be really good. I could pull out my phone, and I could get on my phone right away. I could FaceTime my grandkids. So technology can bring me closer to my grandkids. And I love to talk to my grandkids. So that brought me a little bit more joy. thought about that little boy with all that change. And my heart just melted because I remember the first time my kids went to buy a Christmas present for their dad, and they had their own money. And you know what? Adam did the same thing. He had change, and he just put it on the counter, and he had to count it all. Luckily, there weren't people behind us in line, so it didn't make that much difference because he wanted to count it all by himself. And thinking about that memory, oh, wow, that did bring me a lot of joy. Okay? Then I started to think about the woman who didn't have enough money to pay for those gifts. Oh, no. Oh, no. And I thought, how lucky I am that I have most of the money that I want to buy gifts for, okay? There's not been a time that I've gone into the store and said, oh, I have to put something away because I don't have enough money. And that made me feel very, very lucky and very joyful that I could have enough money to give to other people, okay? Then lastly, that poor baby. You know what? Babies cry. And I thought about baby Jesus. Do you think baby Jesus ever cried? No. Yeah. I think so. Especially maybe that night that he was born, because they said they wrapped him in swaddling clothes, in a cloth. Yeah. He didn't have all the fancy clothes that little babies do now, okay? He was not born in a nice hospital or a nice home. He was born out in a stable. But look how much joy Jesus has brought to us now in our lives. So our third Sunday of Advent is about joy. It's about the joy that you have in your hearts and your lives. And sometimes we forget that joy. And sometimes we have to erase our unjoy, and we find our joy inside of us. And that's what I want you to remember this week. As things get really busy before Christmas time, is you need to find that joy inside of you, okay? So I tell you what, I don't have enough of these for everybody. I do have coloring pages. So I'm going to meet you in the back as soon as we finish here, and you can decide if you want one of these or if you want a color page, okay? So let's walk on in the back, and we'll do this really quietly as they continue with our service, all right? I'll see you in the back.
Financial donations. You may give online at macbrethren.org. That's maccobb@macbrethren.org. If you are worshiping with us in person, you may place your gift in the offering box at the back of the sanctuary. Just slip it through the slot in the top of the box. Or you may mail your gift to the church office at 200 North Carey Street, McPherson, Kansas 67460. Or hand deliver your check to the church office. Just push it through the mail slot at the Education Building. If you join our worship from afar, please donate to local needs in your area. Thank you for sharing.
Mary Jesus, oh my Jesus, so lonely, meek and mild. New life, new hope, new joy he brings. Won't you listen to the angels sing? Glory, glory, glory to the newborn King. He was heralded by the angels. He was born in a lowly manger. The Virgin Mary was his mother, and Joseph was his earthly father. Three wise men came from afar. They were guided by a shining star to see King Jesus where he lay in a manger filled with hay. Jesus, oh Jesus, my Lord, what a wonderful child. Jesus, oh my Jesus, so lonely, meek and mild. New life, new hope, new joy he brings. Won't you listen to the angels sing? Glory, glory, glory to the newborn King. They sang glory, glory, glory to the Mary had a baby.
Worship choir, and my hope, my prayer is someday I'm not the only one dancing in my seat when a nice, powerful spiritual like that just blasts through the sanctuary. Thank you. And thank you, Becky, for getting me dancing as much as my back will allow me to. Good morning. This morning, our scripture focus comes from two different texts, both with the same foundation. The first one from Isaiah 61, verses 1 through 4, and speaks of return. The Spirit of the sovereign Lord is on me because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. God has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives and release from darkness for the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn and provide for those who grieve in Zion, to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. They will be called oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord for the display of God's splendor. They will rebuild the ancient ruins and restore the places long devastated. They will renew the ruined cities that have been devastated for generations. And now, a powerful song of liberation from Luke 1, 46 through 56, Mary's Magnificat. And Mary said, by the way, this answers a lot of questions about a Christmas song, if you need to know. And Mary said, my soul glorifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God, my Savior. For God has been mindful of the humble state of God's servant. From now on, all generations will call me blessed, for the Mighty One has done great things for me. Holy is God's name. God's mercy extends to those who fear from generation to generation. God has performed mighty deeds with an arm. God has scattered those who are proud in their inmost thoughts. God has brought down rulers from their thrones, but has lifted up the humble. God has filled the hungry with good things, but has sent the rich away empty. God has helped this servant Israel, remembering to be merciful to Abraham and his descendants forever, just as God promised our ancestors. And Mary stayed with Elizabeth for about 3 months and then returned home. I have to offer full transparency that I've learned a painfully powerful lesson this weekend. That as I get older and continue to run against the wind, to borrow a phrase from Bob Seger, I'm beginning to realize that years are just sort of flowing from one to the next, and I'm beginning to connect years to experiences instead of the actual date, except yesterday stands alone. 23 years ago, Kendra and I made a promise to one another, and it was a cold day. I mean, it was like 10 below cold. And we honored that anniversary by moving, of course, because how else do you honor an anniversary of 23 years together but by lifting and falling under heavy appliances and waking the next morning with a sore back? There's a little levity there, I hope. But as I reflect on the 23 years, there are many experiences that Kendra and I have shared together. And one in particular happened in 2007. Kendra and I and several others from Ohio found ourselves walking the desolate streets of the St. Bernard Parish and the lower 9th Ward during a week of working with disaster ministries. Now, it was a wonderful sign of grace. We moved into the place to meet those in charge, and we heard that the Wagner brothers had just constructed the trailer that we were sitting in, and it felt like a little bit of McPherson and Ohio joined together. I think I can share for Kendra as well that what we saw and felt that week not only bound us closer to one another and those who shared that journey, but it binds us to those that were present, that we worked with during that Holy Week. But the reality it is one thing to see the destruction and the devastation and the magnitude on a television screen or hear it in the news. It is something entirely different and surreal to have to experience it firsthand. To feel the boarded doorways with an X on the front that revealed missing or those who were killed by the storm. It was more heart-wrenching and also grace-filled to break bread with residents who are praying for some form of normalcy, a chance to move back into their homes, the homes they've only known, clinging to hope that their home, a home that was passed down through generations, would still be theirs and not lost to bureaucracy and greed. Hearing those stories hits harder when it's around the table. It is also something uniquely divine about driving finish nails into trim as the homeowner stood over our shoulder sharing her stories of joy and love and grace. That week stands as a memory I will cling to, even if I don't remember the exact dates we were there. Could it be, sisters and brothers, that that's why images are so vivid and real? Because that one week, our senses were overwhelmed with sights and smells and sounds and scenes that attach themselves deep into our memories forever. And every image of the lower 9th, whether it's the lower 9th or the parts of New Orleans or even of Katrina itself, every time we see these images, we find ourselves taken back to that week and walking those streets ourselves. We remember, and we take a chance to share our journey with any who will listen. We reflect on what that week has on our lives. But here's a reality check. After that week, Kendra and I and others came home to secure housing, to normal lives, to well-paying jobs. But those folks, those persons, those new friends in St. Bernard in the lower 9th, all the righteous people we met, all whose lives were changed forever, they stayed. They had to. We left and returned to life as it was, as we remember it, but many who stayed, whose lives changed forever, lost when levees broke, even today, 18 years later, continue to dream of how things once were and pray that someday, in some way, things might return to normal. Perhaps normal will never be. Perhaps businesses will never flock back to the lower 9th, sparking an economic boom or creating jobs. Perhaps justice will remain as distant as anything before, as transparency and accountability for those in charge never happens. Perhaps the ongoing narrative that disasters like Katrina will continue to illustrate the gap, the large gap between those with access to anything they need to thrive, to restore, to rebuild, and those who are marginalized, cast aside, simply a number on a boarded doorway. Because many who called New Orleans home that didn't live in the lower ninth, those prior to Katrina, they found a way to return to lives that were not unlike those prior to. While our dear friends, our dear new friends in the lower ninth continue to wonder, what if? I reflect on our time in the St. Bernard Parish on the lower ninth because as I meditated on today's text this week, the images of Katrina continue to overwhelm me. In today's Isaiah text specifically, we have a promise of return. We have a people once dispersed, once removed from their homes, as Catherine has shared the last couple of weeks, a people disconnected from everything they knew about God and the divine promise and faith. The Babylonian captivity has separated them from all of their story and their rich history. The occupation of Israel separated people not just from their land, but from their identity as a folk of God. And the harm was greater than loss of home. The Babylonians destroyed everything: physical structures, communal identity, faith in God's promise, and even emotional ties. So as the dispersed Jewish people found refuge elsewhere just to survive, I wonder if it was the memories of what was, of home, of faith, and temple, that gave them hope to simply continue. Generations passed. The dispersion continued. But then something happened unexpected. The form of another conqueror came to power, Cyrus, a Persian king who invited all to return home. 3 generations had passed, as Catherine shared last week, but the emotional trauma, the generational trauma, the spiritual trauma of the violence remained. Yet they still held to the skeletal belief that they survived for a reason and there's something to go home to. Their origin story leads us to today's text, where the author of Isaiah 61 captures the reality of folks returning home, similar to those returning post-Katrina, because what they returned home to was not what they expected. The glory of what was had been smashed to rubble. The dreams of what could be had morphed into nightmares of what reality is. The temple gone, the home demolished, sense of peace forgotten, the idyllic dreams of parents and grandparents, the ones they had given their children, collapsed into rubbish as the real scene of destruction surrounded them. But at least they were home. Surely that could be a place to start. And this is where the author of Isaiah connects to the people's journey of God's promise and ties in the great year of Jubilee. An event that was supposed to happen every 50 years anyway, when all the debts forgiven, when all the prisoners would be set free, when every slate was wiped clean, and every single person could have the promise of a new start. Cyrus, the unlikeliest of godly people, had given the folks a chance to know the power of Jubilee. But they had work to do, because they knew even among the rubble, God was with them and they could rebuild. Hear the joy, yes, the joy in Isaiah's call to them. The Spirit of the sovereign Lord is on me because the Lord has anointed me to preach good news to the poor. God has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives and release from darkness for the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn and provide for those who grieve in Zion, to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, an oil of gladness instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. They will be called oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord for the display of the divine splendor. They will rebuild the ancient ruins and restore the places long devastated. They will renew the ruined cities that have been devastated for generations. Stone by stone, the people managed to recreate a home, a new life. Life was returning to some form of normal. even if it was never quite as the stories had rehearsed they heard. They had known now a sense of peace and that God's promise was as real as it had ever been. But I got to share something historically. Living in the Mediterranean world, it always felt like another conqueror was waiting to take over. It felt like a boiling pot about to boil over. So even as the lives seemed to return to what was, an empire was building across the sea. The Jewish people had nothing to do with the violence that was about to enter the world, but their divine geography simply put them as a consequence of historic struggle. And what was next was an empire that would last for 1,000 years. And this Caesar did not know Cyrus's compassion or welcoming nature. This was a violent and oppressive world that a young mother would find herself walking into. A young mother would give birth to the way that would change history. But before I get to Mary, I want to introduce you to a young man who also had the ability to change the world. Dewan Strickland lives in St. Louis, and he is changing the world one elementary school lunch at a time. Right now, he's a 9th grader at St. Louis University High School. There's 2 things I want to share about this story before I go on. One, it shows that even in our society of wealth, a lot of public schools lack the financial ability to meet the needs of their students. And 2, one doesn't need to be Bill Gates to raise money to help others. It only takes a dream and a passion for change to make a difference. Strickland was one such agent of change. He had known hunger growing up. He remembers sitting at a lunch table without food, without meal money, watching his classmates eat till their bellies were full, while he simply heard the growls in his stomach. But Dewan didn't feel called to change the world for himself. He felt a pull to make sure other students never felt this isolation and this pain. So he created a GoFundMe account and started a campaign to raise money. But his dream was not to help one student. He wanted to erase all food debt for every student at McCurdy Elementary, the school he had attended growing up. Before he started this, he went to the school principal. Before school started that year, it was a year ago, he went to the principal with a check in hand from his GoFundMe. And he paid off every single student's debt for the entire year. Not a single elementary school at McCurdy Elementary would ever have to feel the pain of going hungry again or the shame of not having enough. Strickland raised enough to put enough food on everyone's plate, but he did so by also protecting the dignity of each student. This is liberation at its most basic level. It is powerful, it is monumental, it is world-changing. And just so you're aware, in next week's email, I sent a link to the story, as well as a link to the GoFundMe account, if you feel called to add to his desire to change the world. Dewan's ministry points us back to Isaiah's reference to the great year of Jubilee when all will be made right. Debts will be erased, lives will be restored, and it ties us to our own sense of what it means to eliminate debt. It seems so many of us within the Western Christian church feel like folks have made their beds so they must sleep in them. Maybe. It could be. But joy flows from unmerited grace. Debts forgiven. Joy flows because we don't deserve it. It is simply a gift. Not because of any act of our own, but because of folks like Dewan who chooses to pay off the debts of others. Someone, something, perhaps God decides to erase all debts so we can be free, chains can be broken, lives can be restored. That is when hope is real, peace is experienced. And what is one of the greatest rewards that comes with debts erased? Joy. A joy so full, so powerful, so present, we may even have to sing a song or two, which brings us back to Mary and Mary's response to the good news within. And I want to thank a brother of mine who inspired me to reflect on the popular Christmas song this week. He posted that Mary did in fact know. We all are familiar with the song, Mary, Did You Know? Yes? But if we are biblical students at all, we realize that in her words in the Gospel of Luke, she was quite aware of what was going on. The patriarch simply silenced her voice. If only we had allowed her to preach, who knows what the song might have offered us instead. And not maybe just listen to her, but actually hear her in what she offers. Because Mary knew from the time the first angel visited and promised that she would be the mother of the child that changed history. Mary knew from the first time she experienced morning sickness that the one growing within her would save us all. Mary knew from the change in her dietary desires. Remember, she's human. Pregnancy changes what you want to eat. Perhaps craving food she never thought possible. Mary knew then that the child developing within her would be the one to feed the hungry and rescue the poor. Mary knew with each kick that the baby within her womb, that each kick offered a little tickle to her soul. She knew that one day her firstborn would make everything right. Mary knew, she knew, all right, that when the day came and the birth pains began, she would dream of all that could be. And this one child, her first child, the one breathing his first breath and crying in the manger, she knew that he was the one God has sent. Mary knew, and her song proves it. Mary knew that Jesus' birth changed everything. She knew that his presence would liberate the marginalized. She knew that his ministry would break chains and free captives. She knew that he was indeed Emmanuel, and history would never, ever be the same. She knew all of this, and she did the only thing she could do. With so much joy flowing from her, she sang, and we can too. But more than sing, we can join in the great year of the Lord, the great jubilee and the work that comes with it. We can help make God's reign for the most vulnerable in our world feel real and tangible. Because as the persons returning home to Israel post-Babylon quickly learned, they had to work together to make dreams come true. And even those dispersed, the lower ninth inhabitants, as they returned home, and they learned they had to work together with others helping to not only rebuild their homes, but to restore lives. And as Dewan Strickland's story illustrates, one person may have the faith to make a difference, but as he chose to do so, others joined the struggle. Because not long after his story became public, a member of his community, Yolanda Duncan, returned the favor. She matched every single dollar he raised. But she didn't give it to his GoFundMe. She gave it to him so that he would begin to build a new life for himself, so his needs would be met. Joy overflowed. In a world, sisters and brothers, where so much seems off and so much out of line with how God chooses to save the world, a young mother knew that history itself hinged upon the birth of her son. As out of sync as the world seems to be with Jesus' message, even from those who profess to follow Jesus, let us remember, sisters and brothers, that the year of Jubilee remains and hope exists. As violence seems to grip the headlines and fear overwhelms us, let us remember peace and its partner justice, that they stand as the most sustainable mechanisms for whole lives. And as chains cling to persons, binding them to poverty and marginalization and isolation, let us remember a 13-year-old from St. Louis who had the faith to change the world. For so many, not just in his community, but I believe it'll branch out and spread. And when you do, as he has done, we will bring joy, a deep joy, full joy, inviting others to sing songs of hope, to dance as their spirits lightened. But more than let us remember, sisters and brothers, let us join in the work of restoring and rebuilding so that we can also add our voices to the divine choir. May it be so. Amen. please rise and join in the sending psalm. I hope you know that within our own community of faith, young people are changing the world. 3 of our young ones, Mac kids, raised a lot of money for the Cat House in the Humane Society. They found themselves in Facebook and posted everywhere for the work that they have done. And I know they're more connected. I don't have permission to share their names, but I want you to know that they are here today. And I invite you to ask around. I'm sure you'll find them. And their work was not unnoticed, as another member of this community of faith matched every dollar they raised so that the Cat House could be fully funded. These moments of grace and ministry seem at times insignificant to us, but they are huge. They are huge because these young people now know they can make a difference and they can change the world. And they know their community of faith believes in them and supports them, and will walk with them every step of the way. And there was joy to be had. I'm not a cat person, but I'm sure there was joy to be had that day. Ask around. You'll get a chance to meet them. Go in love. Go in peace. Amen.